Hi guys, hope you're doing well. This video is going to be really focused on the Beast Empire. What is it? What are we expecting? What are we seeing right now take place? How close are we? So really, that's kind of the focus of it. So to begin with, the Beast Empire is ultimately, as we look at it, will be, well, you really have to go through Daniel chapter 7, 8, 9. We obviously don't go through 3 chapters. So we really would focus, keep it short and simple. We'll go to Revelation chapter 17. So Revelation chapter 17, verses 11 through 13 is where we're going to kind of just look at those main verses, and then we're going to be looking at some other verses because I think they're significant. We should probably look at, especially with the things happening in the world. And I'm not trying to just make things worse than they really are or whatever. No, the reason I make this video is because I believe that what's happening is real. I think we're really close. I think the rapture is really near, extremely near. Yeah, that's a long story, but really near. I think which means the tribulation is very near. The revealing of the Antichrist, all that stuff is really near. The end times is really, I think, upon us. I mean, it's at the press, it's at the door. And if I didn't think that was true, I wouldn't be making these videos. I'm not trying to make them to, I don't know, make people think that somehow something's there that's not there. I don't sell videos. I don't sell books. What I'm sharing with you is what I truly believe and what I've studied and what I'm seeing happening in the world. And I'm just sharing it with people so that they can be ready and they can share it with other people. So throughout the years, many Christians have done these studies. I'm not really bringing anything new to the table in a sense. It's just that I'm giving you a view of it from a person living through it, and experiencing it as a Christian who's looking at it from the prism of the Bible. And so, yeah, as a student of the Bible, I've studied it for years and I've looked at it. And I definitely think that, I'm not trying to superimpose upon, the events that are happening right now and then seeing a biblical worldview out of that because, I got some kind of, over fascination with it. No, I think as Christians, we're all seeing it. Many are seeing it because we've simply looked at what the scripture says. We're seeing what's happening in the world and there's a lot of harmony there. So, like I said, I don't want to superimpose it upon it. But what I see, I think that we are that generation. We're seeing it happening, and we need to be aware of that. And as Christians, we need to be open, upfront, and confident to realize, hey, we can say these things and tell other brothers and sisters what's taking place who may not have the same view or worldview or whatever, or study in this area. So that's kind of where we start. So anyway, Revelation 17 is talking about where it gets into in that chapter. If you're not familiar, you can go and look at my video on Revelation chapter 17. It might help a little bit, but basically it's about this harlot system, religious system that at the end times, which by the way, we see that happening right now, just so you know. So that does fit in that sense. But it goes into this beast and the beast empire and so forth. And it talks about how this association with this global religion, as it were, will be associated with the beast, and ultimately the worship of this beast will come out of it. But it appears it's riding upon it, this beast, and eventually it'll be destroyed by this beast empire. But anyway, it goes on to say, let's remember the beast, Satan, they want to be worshipped, and they're not going to have a rival. So this global religion will ultimately be destroyed so that everyone will worship the beast and ultimately the one behind the beast, Satan himself. So, but it's another story, another time. Anyway, it goes, says the beast, in verse 11, the beast which was and is not, is himself also the eighth, is one of the seventh, and he goes to destruction. Verse 12, the 10 horns which you saw are the 10 kings which have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings and the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. Okay, well, number one, we won't get into so much about the seventh and eighth, but for sure that we know that these 10 kings, 10 horns, 10 kingdoms will rise up and become the dominant power at the end. They're only going to reign for 1 hour, so a very short period of time. What does that mean? Is it a year? Is it less than a year? I personally think it's less than a year, but time will tell, obviously. But I think it's going to be a very short period of time. Obviously, a biblical hour. If you divide it out into a day, it'd be really short. But if a day is a year, then an hour, you can kind of figure from that. So hard to say. It really is. Does that mean a month? If you're breaking it down, or if you're counting how they looked at it in a day being just 12 hours in a day, 12 months, 1 year, hard to say. But in any case, kind of how we should look at it. Why is that important? Well, there's a lot of instability happening right now in the world if you're not paying attention. Economically, throughout the world with this COVID thing, countries are really having a problem. Businesses are having problems, but countries are having problems as well. You're seeing record bankruptcy and so forth. Well, that's just a reflection of what's taking place on a grander scale between nations. And these other nations are also having economic problems. Well, when you see a demise in the global economy, it's ripe for the rise of change. And this change isn't just economic. Hey, yeah, you can bring in people keep talking about that, a global economic system of some sort. Yeah, you could definitely have that. But without the power or force of somebody to back that, it's really not going to matter. And not in a real sense. Well, that's what this beast empire is. It comes about at the last hour, which means that America in some way must come to allow for this other power to rise up and become the one who will facilitate the mark of the beast, or a global economic system. So it's going to be a global economic system, but it's going to be a global power. Looking at Daniel chapter 7, 8, 9, especially you see a lot of that in chapter 8. You get a chance. We don't have time to go through 3 chapters of Daniel, obviously, so you get a chance to look at those. It's focusing on it starts with the mention of the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, being revealed, in his pre-incarnated, in a sense, as you see him, Christophany, in a sense that he's not here on earth, but he's described in heaven, which would be in chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Well, in the same sense, we would see that then it kind of goes into these kingdoms, and then it starts talking about this final kingdom and this beast and so forth. Well, that's what it's talking about. That's what it's referring to. Well, that's what we're focusing on. Yeah, so if you get a chance, read those. It'll start in chapter 7 and go all the way through where you see, especially chapter 8, and then you'll see it in 9 where it talks about this beast, this prince who is to come, and so forth. So if we know that they're only going to reign for one time, and it's going to be a 10-nation coalition of some sort, 10 kings, and that they give them their power, and they're only going to be reigning for one short period of 1 hour, very short period of time, we won't have this 50-year, 60-year time for a country to develop and so forth. This is going to come out, and it's going to be a coalition of nations that somehow have an agreement to come together. And it's going to be very quickly, which means we should be looking for some kind of economic collapse, some economic change, maybe even a transformation of national alliances, or even a breakup of America. Who knows? I mean, that's not out of the picture. America could, elements of America could break off, and to re-strengthen itself, it could form itself into a international alliance or coalition, so that this new beast empire is a truly a global empire, and that breaking of America, as it were, would then retain its military power, but yet increase its overall global and power especially if it unites with other nations, especially in areas where we would expect them to see elements of Europe, elements of around the world. Maybe Canada, maybe Australia, maybe New Zealand, maybe England, who are talking about this, reemerging of a new coalition between them. America could very well, at one time was a colony of England, could very well be a part of that. And then out of all of them, come together in this new kind of establishment of a government, agree to give one person, like a new president, a new prime minister, whatever you want to call him, a new leader that comes up out of this group, which we would know would be the Antichrist. And he would be selected from among these nations that come together. Well, obviously, if predominantly most of America comes into this, most likely that leader will come out of America, most likely. Not saying that's what's going to happen, but I'm saying we need to be aware of those scenarios that could happen, and obviously how these things can play out very quickly very fast, and it doesn't have to take 50, 60, or 70 years for things to happen. But in a world full of turmoil, fast changes can happen, and we've seen that before. We should be looking for that. These guys come into power, they reign for 1 hour, they give their power to the Antichrist. So this isn't like we're going to have this long time to look at these events down the road and say, oh, well, I can see it forming. I can see it forming, kind of like we've seen with the European Union and so forth. See it forming. It could be it. Maybe it's it. It's possibly it. No, this thing will happen very quickly and establish itself. So I think it may be elements of the European Union. They'll probably break up, and ultimately it'll be 10. Now, some people say, well, the empire, the beast empire, has to be over the geographic area of old Roman Empire. I disagree with that. I think it doesn't have to be the exact landmass. That's why it says it's different. It's similar. It's kind of, but it's changed. It's morphed. It's transformed. That's why when you look at that prophecy of the statue given to Nebuchadnezzar, and it's given the final kingdoms, and you get down to the final miry clay and iron that's mixed. It's changed. It's transformed. Just like the Roman Empire split and broke apart, went over to Constantinople and became a different leg of it, as it were, the Eastern and Western Empire. Well, the 10 legs, really the 10 toes, is where these feet again makes for a transformation, which I think becomes global, and that's why I think America could become a part of that, as well as Canada, as well as Australia, New Zealand. Who knows? Could all be, especially they could all be part of this final beast empire, making up while you still have maybe Italy, who knows, Spain, who knows what the final empire will be. But I could see where that transformation can happen very quickly, and be formed very quickly, and we can see all those nations coalesce into this final beast empire, which would be still part of the old Roman Empire, maybe Italy and so forth, but make up this new power base that would be, if you think about it, if all those nations joined, my goodness, you're talking about a true global power. And if they were willing to, unlike the European Union, which doesn't have a single leader, a global leader, or a single unified leader, a prime minister of Europe, as it were, this one wouldn't make that same mistake. If they come together, they would say, we need to have a global leader, we'd have a single leader right away. Unfortunately, these 10 select the Antichrist to be this leader who's waiting in the wings, and I think he's probably alive right now. And who knows, may have had visions of all this happening. Who knows, as Satan has inspired him to see these things, maybe. Who knows? Satan knows the Bible very well. He has a good idea of some of the things he's going to be doing and where he's going to be doing it at. So anyway, so that's some of the things we should be looking at. Why is that important? How do I know these things even have any significance with us right now? Well, with all the things happening, everything's pointing to a really soon occurrence, a soon happening of these events. And I'm not just trying to be, blow things out of proportion or sensationalist or anything like that. No, I think we're truly blessed to be able to see these things, even though it's fearful, and then they go through this. And a lot of people, experiencing difficult times and so forth. I think that we're very blessed to be able to see the Bible come alive and see these events happening. Number one, we see the Sanhedrin reestablished. We see the establishment of where they're working to rebuild the temple, in real time, the Jewish people, where they've got a priesthood, they're doing sacrifices. That part of it is ready. That's clearly an end times prophecy. Announcement of the Sanhedrin, reestablishment of the artifacts, from the garments to the temple things, the menorahs. I mean, you name it. Go on YouTube. You can type in Temple Mount Institute, look at artifacts, look at the things they've done. Huge stones that's been diamond cut, so it's not cut with steel instruments that are already anointed cornerstones. The altar's been anointed. I mean, these guys are ready, prepared to rebuild the temple. Things that are happening in the city of David, new discoveries all the time, including that walkway that supposedly went up to the Temple Mount, or they say. They may come out and say, hey, we've actually discovered the actual place of it, and they're prepared to build the temple right away. I mean, you could see something like that happen in your future. But a big one that we should be looking at is from Joel chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, which I've talked about many times, which is the restoration of Jerusalem and Judea. Well, Jerusalem has been restored to Israel already. It's been acknowledged by the existing United States government, and whatever it morphs into later would still be acknowledged, that they've acknowledged Jerusalem's sovereign authority over Jerusalem. Now it's Judea, this annexation that they keep talking about. It's in the front headlines all the time. You go to any kind of Israeli news, go check it out yourself. You'll look at, they're always talking about annexation of Judea and Samaria. It never was talked about before. It is now. It's on the table. It perfectly falls in line with the restoration of Judea. It was the one part that was missing. That's why when people are saying, oh, the end times, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wait a minute, you got to have the restoration of Judea. Well, now they're talking about it. That immediately, that was what I was waiting for, right? Because Jerusalem is, a big key of it, but without Judea, it really wasn't there. Well, now we see that happening. That's key. That's a big one, because when that happens, that's the indicator that God said he's going to bring the nations down to the valley of judgment. Clearly, it's end times prophecy, a key one. So it says, verse 1 and 2, it says basically, for behold, in those days and at that time, when I restored the fortunes of Judea and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations, and they have divided up my land. Truly an end times prophecy. And you notice that the focus is on Israel because the church isn't here. The church has been raptured already. Some people can disagree with that all they want, but it's definitely how I read that and see it. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. It falls in line with what you're going to see with Revelation chapter 7, where you have the 12 tribes of Israel and these 144,000 representatives for Christ who go and become his global ministers. Why? Because the church is no longer here. You do have those who come out of the nations who are these tribulation saints or believers in Christ, who will be made up of every tribe, tongue, and nation, who basically are those who these Jewish people, I think, have gone out and witnessed to. And but the church has never mentioned any of that. Why? Because we're his ambassadors right now. We're the ones who are going out and sharing the gospel everywhere. But obviously that doesn't happen during that period of time. They're not mentioned. We don't see the church or the bride again until Revelation 19. We're already in heaven. So I think the rapture is clearly a pre-tribulational one. And I think, it's well before the first resurrection, which we see in chapter 20, but the bride's already in heaven. So, and the first resurrection, like I brought up before, is only made up of those who have gone through the tribulation and been martyred for the faith of Jesus Christ. That's clearly stated in chapter 20. And if you're not part of the first resurrection, then there's only one other, and that's the second. And also in chapter 20, which is all by works, which we know we're not saved by works. So we would have no part of the second resurrection. It makes no sense. The bride's already in heaven in the first place. So why would you then go and be judged again? It makes absolutely no sense. So it indicates to me that there's a pre-tribulation rapture. If you're in the tribulation, you're part of the first resurrection as part of the tribulation saints. And it's pretty straightforward, I think, if you actually go through and look at it. So it tells me that you have the rapture, and you have those who basically the Jewish people have converted during that period of time. Well, okay, if that's the case, that means the rapture is very near. But first, we have to see the revealing of the Antichrist. Why do I say that? Because of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. I won't go through it now. Verses 1, 2, 3, 4. Read through those. You'll see what I'm talking about. But definitely, I think we're going to be here to see the revealing of the Antichrist. He will come on the scene. We'll know who he is. We'll be telling the world. But through all this trouble and tribulation that's going on and transformation, he'll come on the scene when we see this 10-nation coalition. And, in my opinion, this is what's going to happen. We'll be telling the world. They won't be listening. I think the rapture will take place shortly thereafter. And then because he has to be on the scene in power, in a position to where he can confirm a covenant for 7 years with Israel and the nations, making a false agreement from from Daniel chapter 9, verses 26, 27-ish. And he's basically saying, hey, I'm confirming this covenant, but in the midst of it, he goes in and breaks that covenant. Well, we know that's the Antichrist. And it's him making that covenant is the final week of Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy, which we know as the tribulation, 7 years. And that's where we get that from. So we have 7 years tribulation. In the midst of it, he breaks it, goes in, declares himself to be God, from 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 4, I think it is. So you're right there. I mean, those are the things that were key things that are going to happen. What else do I see happening? Well, like I said, you have the Sanhedrin, you have the Jewish people preparing for the temple. That's something that is completely distinct of Christianity, and yet Christians aren't facilitating this per se. So it's happening. Establishment and findings of the city of David, unbelievable stuff happening, unlike any other time in history. Okay, we see them talking about the restoration of Judea and Samaria. Key prophecy from Jeremiah, Joel chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. A key one, end times prophecy, which I think is a strong indicator. When that announcement takes place, hold on, baby, this is it. The next thing we should be looking at is global instability and what's happening right now, which is going to open the door for this new empire to rise up. And there will be some transformations. You may see a breakup, like I said, of what is currently the European Union and America, which in out of this forms this global new 10-nation coalition of powers that come together and have temporary leaders that all give their power and authority to one guy, who will then come up, and he's actually the Antichrist, which will come out of one of those. Who that is, I don't know, but that's how I see the beast empire. It'll be a coalition of this new power, and that's how he would have this power that instantaneously, because it would still have the military power of the United States, plus it would combine the military power of these other nations as well, making it really no one else. And you got to remember, if the Gog-Magog war is over, then you no longer have the contention of Russia anymore. You no longer have Iran and Turkey. That's that those armies will be destroyed during the Gog-Magog war. And the only thing really that could be standing in the way is in the wings over here is the kings, plural, of the East, which I think you're going to wind up seeing the kings being most likely a combination of like Pakistan. China obviously is the big one, and I think possibly India. India will, since Russia was no longer able to be there with them, and even though they're having antagonisms right now between India and China, I think they will see more in common, and they'll have more fear, as it were, of this final empire that rises up, that they will come together and make an alliance of some sort. I could be totally wrong on that, but that's how I think it's going to happen. The populations would be enormous, would easily fit into a 200 million man army that it talks about, and as they ultimately march down to the final battle of Armageddon, and being that they ultimately end up being a judgment that kills 1/3 of mankind. All that perfectly would fit. These are scenarios that I'm kind of looking for. Obviously, got to hold this stuff a little, not too tightly. You want to hold this stuff so that, because we don't know exactly how things are going to play out. But this is kind of how I'm seeing things that could possibly happen, and keeping an eye on it to see it, not trying to read into it. But if things are going to happen, I kind of see that. Okay, well, this is where we're seeing events happening. I think we're seeing that event for the Gog-Magog war happen right now. The Arab Spring movement opened up the door for that. Turkey becoming a very antagonistic toward NATO. You could see that whole alliance breaking up. You could see where they've now kind of drifted over to Russia and Iran's sphere of influence, yet not trusting each other, which is a perfect picture of how we see the Gog-Magog war alliance. They don't really trust each other. As a matter of fact, when God sends a strong earthquake on them, they turn on each other and start fighting and killing each other because they don't trust each other. I don't think Russia trusts Turkey. They fought lots of wars together. I don't think Turkey trusts anybody, and no one really trusts Turkey. I think they'll turn on each other and fight each other. And then it says that God will send a strong sword upon them. I honestly believe that will most likely either be the United States or whoever it is. But once it breaks apart after that, I think America will be in tremendous problem afterward, because they can't sustain it. They can't sustain this huge amount of debt. There's just no connection anymore between the people and its government. You don't see this, unified people. You don't see people in that sense in America unified as Americans. And that's why I think it's perfectly, the atmosphere is ripe for a change, and for this is how things like that happen. When you see revolutions, when you see civil wars, when you see changes, it may happen very quickly, and you could see where part of the United States, especially in the West Coast, goes off and wants to declare itself, its own entity, while maybe the biggest portion of the United States maybe wants to sustain itself and call itself whatever. Who knows? But in any case, those are things we should be kind of looking for as Christians, and realizing that this beast empire is going to come on the scene. It's going to come on very quickly, and it's going to have global reach, global power. It'll be for a very short period of time, in a time of great instability in the world, coming out of this enormous war, the Gog-Magog war, where everybody's basically shocked, to say the least, of what's happening. I mean, because when you look at the devastation it talks about, we're probably talking about nuclear maybe, people are going to be looking and ready for change and willing to accept anything, especially if we start seeing massive amount of death and so forth, and then even nuclear possibilities could take place in that one. Most people in the world would be ready for a dramatic change, and at that point, everybody's going to be like, hey, we can't continue down this road because it's going to kill all of mankind, and we don't want to be like that, and especially when they see the after effects of this battle. I think people are going to be willing to accept anybody, including the Antichrist, who comes on the scene, and this new coalition that will emerge up out of it. That's how I see it. I think the Antichrist is very near. I think the end is very near. A lot of things are happening. Talk of the events occurring. We might see initial wars before this, small, quick ones. Where right now you see a lot of conflict out between Greece and Turkey. I think Turkey's more involved in wanting to connect and get that oil and stuff out of Libya. And you might see an Egypt war with Turkey, which I don't think it will work out very well for Egypt, because if you look in Joel chapter 3 verses 19, it says Egypt will become a waste and Edom will become a desolate wilderness because of the violence done to the sons of Judah, in whose land they have shed innocent blood. Now some will look at that at other times or whatever, but I still think when it's talking about this that there's going to be the kind of references back over to Ezekiel chapter 29. You can also see that as well in verse 9 and so forth. It talks about the land of Egypt will become a desolate and waste, and then they will know that I am the Lord. And it kind of talks about that a little bit. So you can see where the possibility is that Egypt won't fare too well in this, some kind of conflict that will probably, if Turkey wins this, it will embolden Russia and Turkey to make this alliance. And if there is a breakup or anything of America with what's going on in this election cycle and the whole economic instability in the world and everything, you could see where they can miscalculate and say, hey, now's the time to take a spoil, to go in and have an agreement to split it 50-50 or whatever, 30-30 between Iran, Russia, and Turkey, who knows, and however they agree on it, and divide this spoil between themselves and come down and invade Israel while America's preoccupied, breaking up. They can't do anything. And I think they're miscalculating. Whoever is in power will bring this sword, which I think will be most likely America's power at that time, however waning it may be, will bring unbelievable devastation against those armies, and they will be annihilated within a very short order. I think they're miscalculating, and they will. So, and it opens up the door for this final beast empire and the Antichrist to come on the scene. And right after that, I think the rapture will occur, just like Jesus said, when people aren't expecting it, because they're looking at everything's going on here, and the last thing they're thinking is the rapture, and we're gone, we're out of here. And the tribulation is on the scene. It's a very short period of time after that. People will be shocked. The world will be traumatized. War, millions of people missing all around the world. Yeah, and suddenly they're willing to accept anything, including Antichrist. And his claims, no matter how grandiose or crazy they may be, suddenly he comes on the scene and starts declaring himself to be, eventually God. And just having all the right answers initially, but that's how I kind of see things coming down. Could be totally wrong, but like I said, we need to not hold on too tightly, not think we got all the answers, but definitely need to be looking at this stuff and saying, hey, it's near, real near, and we need to be looking. So there's a lot of instability in the world. This COVID thing didn't happen by chance. God knows what's going on, and if this is working of Satan and so forth, then I think the hour's very short, very near, and we very well could be out of here very soon in the rapture. We need to be sharing the gospel, be faithful ambassadors for the Lord as He's called us to be. Share the good news of Jesus Christ, that He died upon the cross and shed His blood for all mankind, and by believing in Him, you can have eternal life. Believe in His work was completed upon the cross, and you can have eternal life. Repent of your sins. Those are the things that we need to do, and be sharing that gospel with them. Anyway, God bless. Be looking up. Stay safe, and hey, if I don't see you and stuff, I'll see you in the kingdom come. God bless.